Your paycheck goes up, your bank balance looks healthier, and yet your life feels tighter. Groceries feel like luxury items. Rent climbs like it's on a ladder you can't reach. And the strangest part is this. Even when you win a raise, it can still be a loss. Later in this video, you'll see the hidden mechanism that makes this feel personal, even though it's built into the system. Most people think inflation is just prices going up, like bad weather, something that happens to you. But inflation is also a scoreboard, and the rules of that scoreboard decide who gets richer and who gets quietly drained. You've been taught to chase a higher salary like it's the finish line. But what if the finish line moves faster than you can run on purpose? Because if you're feeling like you're doing everything right, working, improving, negotiating, grinding, and still falling behind, that doesn't necessarily mean you failed. It may mean you're playing a game where the house controls the speed of the treadmill. By the end of this video, you'll understand why wages tend to lag behind inflation, why hard work can be mathematically powerless against it, how asset owners win while wage earners struggle, and what actually changes your odds. And there's one truth near the end that most people never realize until it's too late. The system doesn't need to steal from you loudly. It only needs to steal from you slowly. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Your salary is not just a number. It's a contract between you and a world that keeps changing the price tags. If prices rise faster than your pay, you're not earning less, but you are living less. The technical phrase is purchasing power. The emotional phrase is, you're working for a life that keeps shrinking. And the shrinking feels confusing because it's not constant. Some months you're fine. Some years you feel like you can breathe. Then suddenly it hits. The same basket of groceries that used to cost one amount now costs something that makes you stare at the receipt like it's a prank. You ask yourself, did I forget how to budget? But budgeting doesn't fix a moving target. Budgeting is a shield. Inflation is an incoming tide. Now you might say, okay, so I'll just get a better job. Or, I'll keep getting promotions. Or, I'll switch companies. And yes, those things can help. They can buy you time. But here's what nobody tells you. The system is designed so the average person can't sustainably outrun inflation with wages alone. Some individuals can. The median can't. And if you're watching this, you're not trying to become a rare exception. You're trying to understand the trap. So let's start with a story that's painfully familiar. Imagine you're at work, and your manager calls you in. They slide a paper across the desk. Congratulations. We're giving you a 5% raise. You're relieved. Your shoulders drop. You feel seen. You go home and tell someone you love. For a moment, the future feels stable. Then life starts sending invoices. Your rent renewal comes in up 8%. Your car insurance goes up. Utilities jump. Your grocery staples creep higher. And the weirdest part is you can't point to one villain. There's no single person who did it. It's just everywhere. Like the air got more expensive. So you do the math. Your raise gave you, say, an extra £150 a month after taxes. But your rent increase alone took £180. You didn't get richer. You got poorer with a trophy. But here's where it gets strange. You did everything responsibly. You improved your skills, showed up, negotiated, performed. And still, the system casually rebalanced the world around you. What does that mean for you? It means the problem isn't only your income. It's the structure that determines how fast your income can move compared to how fast money itself loses value. Inflation is often described like it's a natural phenomenon, but it's also a policy outcome. Can be influenced by supply shocks, yes. Can be influenced by energy prices, global trade, wars, pandemics, disasters. But the persistent, long-term grind, where year after year your pay feels like it's chasing, has more to do with bargaining power, monetary systems, asset pricing, and who gets access to first money. And now we hit the first hidden lever. Wages are sticky, but prices are slippery. When prices go up, businesses can change a label overnight. A restaurant prints a new menu. A retailer updates a database. A landlord adjusts market rent. But your wage? Your wage is a negotiation. It's a meeting. It's approvals. It's HR policy. It's budget cycles. It's fear. It's comparisons. It's politics. It's the fact that asking for more pay feels like you're requesting a favor, even when you're actually requesting survival. So prices can react instantly. Wages react slowly. And this alone explains a huge part of the pain. Even if wages eventually rise, the lag can crush you. Inflation is fast. Wage growth is delayed. And in the gap, you pay the difference with your life. But here's what nobody tells you. That lag isn't just inconvenience. It is a transfer. Think of it like this. If inflation rises today but your wage adjusts next year, then for that year you're effectively funding someone else's margin. You're absorbing the shock with your purchasing power. Your employer's costs may rise, yes, but the timing matters. They raise prices quickly. They raise wages slowly. In the meantime, the profit gap widens, or at least the pressure is pushed onto you. Now, not every company is evil. Many are squeezed too. But the system-level pattern is consistent. The burden is asymmetrically placed on wage earners because wage earners are the slowest moving part of the machine. But that's just the first layer. The deeper layer is this: your salary is priced in currency. Your cost of living is priced in reality. Currency is a claim on stuff. Food, housing, energy, healthcare, transportation. And when the currency loses value faster than your pay increases, your claim weakens. This leads to the second lever: productivity and pay divorced a long time ago in many economies. You were told a simple story. Work harder, become more productive, and your wages will rise accordingly. That story is sometimes true for individuals in high-leverage roles. But for the majority, productivity gains get captured elsewhere. If a company becomes more productive because of automation, software, better supply chains, or just process optimization, there are several places that surplus can go. Lower prices, higher wages, higher profits, or reinvestment. In recent decades, a large share of it has flowed to profits and asset values rather than broad-based wage increases. And this is where the ground shifts under your feet, because inflation doesn't hit all classes of people the same way. Inflation is not a universal tax. It's a class filter. If you primarily earn wages and spend on necessities, inflation feels like a chokehold. If you primarily hold appreciating assets, stocks, property, businesses, moderate inflation can feel like a tailwind, especially if your assets rise faster than your costs. So you and your wealthy neighbor might live in the same country, under the same inflation rate, but it's not the same game. For you, the scoreboard moves against your income. For them, the scoreboard often moves with their balance sheet. And then comes the third lever. It's the one almost nobody talks about at dinner because it sounds too big to be personal. But it is personal. Money enters the economy unevenly. When new money and credit are created through bank lending, through financial systems, through central bank operations, the first recipients tend to be those already connected to credit markets. Large institutions, corporations, asset buyers, governments. They can spend and invest that money before prices fully adjust. By the time the effect flows through to the average worker, prices are already higher. This is why people say it feels like the rich get richer first. It's not magic. It's timing. It's proximity to the spigot. So while you're waiting for your annual review, other parts of the system have already repositioned. Asset prices can jump quickly. Company valuations can adjust. Rents can reset. Meanwhile, your wage sits there like a locked door with a tiny keyhole labeled performance review. But here's what nobody tells you. Even if your wage does rise, inflation has already rewired the baseline. The new prices become normal. Your raise becomes the story you tell yourself, while the system quietly moved the floor upward. Now think about housing, because housing is the clearest, most brutal example. Housing is not just a product. It's a market where the price is set by what someone can borrow, not just what something costs to build. If interest rates are low and credit is abundant, buyers can bid higher. That lifts prices. Landlords then use those higher prices to justify higher rents, and renters get trapped. So your rent rises not only because inflation. It rises because the asset value of housing rises, and your wage is forced to compete with someone else's leverage. You're not competing with another worker. You're competing with debt. What happens to your savings, your job, your life if this continues? It means even if you save diligently, the goalposts move. A deposit that took years to build can become not enough because the market outran your ability to store value in cash. And that leads to another hidden truth. Cash is a melting ice cube in an inflationary environment. So the responsible person, saving, delaying gratification, can be punished if their savings earn less than inflation. Meanwhile, the person who borrows to buy an appreciating asset can be rewarded because inflation erodes the real value of their debt while the asset climbs. Let that sink in. In many systems, debt can be a ladder and savings can be quicksand. This is the dangerous part. You are told to be careful, but the system often pays the bold. And when the bold have access to cheap credit and the careful do not, the gap widens. Now, maybe you're thinking, so the answer is just to own assets. And yes, ownership matters. But it's not that simple because getting into assets requires capital, and capital is exactly what inflation erodes for wage earners first. It becomes a trap with a locked entrance. You need assets to protect against inflation, but inflation makes it harder to accumulate the assets. So why don't wages just rise automatically with inflation? Because wages are not set by prices. Wages are set by power. Wages are a political economy outcome. They depend on labor market tightness, union strength, minimum wage laws, social safety nets, corporate concentration, globalization, immigration policy, technology, and bargaining norms. In plain language, wages rise when workers can say no and mean it. If you can't say no because you have bills, dependents, debt, or a fragile job market, then wages lag. Employers don't need to be villains. The system simply rewards them for paying as little as the market allows. And here's the twist. Inflation itself can weaken your ability to say no. When prices rise, your emergency fund buys less time. Your savings feel smaller. Your fear grows. That fear makes you less likely to risk quitting or negotiating aggressively. Inflation can quietly discipline labor by raising the cost of resistance. But here's what nobody tells you. It also changes what you accept as normal. You get used to paying more. You get used to struggling. You blame yourself. You think, maybe I'm just not good with money. You internalize a structural problem. And then the system gives you a small raise and you feel grateful, even though it was just catching up to a loss. Now let's zoom out to the big machine. There are 3 clocks running at once. The wage clock, the price clock, and the asset clock. The wage clock ticks slowly. Contracts, reviews, negotiations. The price clock ticks faster. Markets adjust, vendors reprice, landlords raise rents. The asset clock can leap. Stocks can surge in a week. Property can jump in a year. Businesses can revalue instantly. So if you live on wages, you experience the slowest clock. If you live on assets, you experience the fastest. That's why people who already own things often feel like they're on a moving sidewalk going forward, while you're sprinting in place. But here's where it gets even stranger. Many people assume inflation should help workers because unemployment goes down and businesses are doing well. Yet often, the opposite happens. Companies report strong revenues while workers feel squeezed. Why? Because inflation can inflate nominal numbers while real conditions deteriorate. A company can announce record profits while your real wage falls. You can get a raise while your living standard drops. The system can grow while you shrink. This is the turning point. You must stop thinking in money and start thinking in percentages and real value. If inflation is 7% and your wage rises 5%, you took a 2% pay cut in real terms. If your savings earn 3% and inflation is 7%, your savings lost 4% of purchasing power. And if your rent rises 10% while your wage rises 4%, the gap is not a feeling. It's arithmetic. Now let's talk about why this keeps happening year after year, even when there isn't a crisis. Because moderate inflation is not treated as a disaster by policymakers. In fact, many systems target a positive inflation rate. Why? Because persistent deflation can be economically dangerous. If prices fall, people delay spending, debts become harder to repay, and recessions can spiral. So policymakers often aim for stable, low inflation. But here's the brutal side effect. If inflation is the default, and wages are not automatically indexed to inflation, then the default outcome is erosion for wage earners unless they actively fight it. And that fight is exhausting. You're expected to become a negotiator, a job hopper, a strategist, a personal finance expert, and a psychological fortress, just to maintain the same life. That's not personal failure. That's a system that turns stability into a side hustle. But here's what nobody tells you. The system also depends on your belief that stability is possible through obedience alone. If people truly understood that wages tend to lag and purchasing power tends to erode, they would demand different policies, different wage indexing, different bargaining structures, different housing models, different monetary priorities. So instead, the story focuses on individual responsibility. Not because responsibility is bad, but because responsibility alone keeps the system from being blamed. Now, let's hit the most emotionally charged part. Why your salary feels cursed no matter how much you make. Because inflation hits essentials first in your lived experience. Official inflation measures average across categories. But your life has a unique basket. If you spend a large share on rent, food, energy, childcare, commuting, things that can rise faster than the average, then your personal inflation is higher than the headline. So the system tells you inflation is easing, and you look around like, where? Because your life isn't the average. It's your bills. And when essentials rise, you can't substitute easily. You can't stop eating. You can't stop needing shelter. You can't stop heating your home. So inflation in essentials is not a mild inconvenience. It's coercion. This is why people feel trapped even on decent salaries. A higher salary doesn't automatically mean freedom if the structure of costs is designed to capture it. Now we approach the part that makes people angry: corporate pricing power. In concentrated markets where a few companies dominate, they can raise prices more easily. They can protect margins. They can pass costs along. When competition is weak, your paycheck becomes the fuel for pricing decisions you don't control. And it gets worse. Once prices go up, they're sticky too. But in the opposite direction. They don't come down easily. That's why people talk about the new normal. Even if inflation slows, prices can remain high. The rate of increase slows, but the level stays elevated. So your wage needs to catch up not to the past, but to a new, higher plateau. And here's what nobody tells you. Catching up feels like progress even when it's merely recovery. Now let's bring it to the human level again. You wake up early. You commute. You give your hours to a company. You trade the most finite resource you have, time, for currency. And then that currency buys less time-saving comfort, less security, less choice. This is why inflation feels like a thief of time. Because the extra hours you work to maintain the same lifestyle are hours you'll never get back. What happens if this continues for 10 years? You could end up working harder for the same lifestyle, or the same effort for a smaller lifestyle. Either way, you feel a quiet betrayal. Not by one person, but by a structure. Now comes the climax where all the threads tie together. Inflation is the tide. Wage stickiness is the delay. Uneven money entry is the advantage. Asset appreciation is the escape hatch for those who already have access. Housing is the trapdoor. Debt is the lever. And bargaining power is the gatekeeper. Put that together and the pattern becomes chilling. The system rewards ownership and punishes dependency. If you depend on wages, you experience the slow clock. If you own assets, you experience the fast clock. And the gap between clocks creates a transfer over time. That's why it feels like your salary will never outrun inflation. Because in this system, salary is meant to keep you functioning, not necessarily thriving. Keeps you running on the treadmill. Keeps the machine staffed. And the moment you try to break out by saving aggressively, your savings get eroded. The moment you try to escape with housing, you face prices driven by leverage. The moment you try to demand more, you face institutional friction. The system doesn't need to block you with a wall. It just needs to keep raising the incline. But here's the part that changes everything. Even though the system is tilted, it's not fate. It's design. And design can be understood and navigated. So what actually shifts your odds? First, you stop measuring success by nominal raises and start measuring by real purchasing power. Every time you negotiate, you think in real terms. Every time you plan, you assume your currency will weaken over time. That's not pessimism. That's calibration. Second, you increase your leverage. Not in a reckless way, in a structural way. Skills with scarcity. Work that scales. Income streams not trapped in one employer's wage cycle. Industries where labor has bargaining power. The harsh truth is that wage growth follows leverage like a shadow. Third, you understand that inflation is a signal to own something that doesn't melt. That can mean productive assets. That can mean investing. That can mean building equity or ownership in a business or a share of something that grows with the economy. The specifics depend on your risk tolerance and situation, but the principle is the same. If you're only holding cash, you're holding a slowly shrinking claim. Fourth, you treat housing like a battleground, not just a lifestyle choice. Because housing is where inflation and leverage collide hardest. The decisions you make there, where you live, how you rent, whether you buy, how you negotiate, can outweigh dozens of small budgeting wins. And finally, you realize the most powerful lever isn't just personal. It's collective. When workers have bargaining power through tight labor markets, unions, strong wage floors, and social supports, wages track reality more closely. When they don't, wages become the shock absorber for everything else. This is the last thing I want you to remember. If you're working hard and still falling behind, you're not crazy. You're not weak. You're seeing a pattern that was designed to be confusing. Inflation isn't just prices going up. It's the system asking, quietly, who can keep up? And the answer depends on whether you're only a wage earner or an owner of something that moves with the world. So the next time you hear you got a raise, don't just celebrate the number. Ask the only question that matters. Did your life get bigger, or did the treadmill just speed up? If this opened your eyes, stay with us. Because this story isn't over yet, and your future depends on understanding the rules. Drop a comment with the biggest bill that's changed your life in the last year, and tell me whether your pay kept up. And if you want more breakdowns of the forces shaping your money, your job, and your freedom, hit like, subscribe, and let's keep pulling the curtain back before the system tightens the trap again.